August the 29th, 1997, we're in Columbus, Ohio with Thomas J. Conry. Thomas J. Conry. I want to remember that when I see you.
Okay.
And my name's Slade McClendon. I'm the interviewer. And we'll start of the 92nd Recon, Troop D.
Very good.
And we'll just start at the beginning. If
All
you
right.
can tell me about your childhood and your
Okay.
parents and where you grew up.
I was born November 8th, 1920, in Cleveland, Ohio. My parents, my dad's name was James Ambrose Conry. My mother was Mary Ford Conry. They were married on February 17th, 1920. I'm the oldest of 7 children. There was 3 boys and 4 girls. My father was employed on the New York Central Railroad at that time until his retirement after 50 years. My mother was a housewife. In education, I attended grammar school at St. Jerome's School in Cleveland. I graduated from grammar school in 1933. I enrolled at Cathedral Latin High School following graduation and graduated from Cathedral Latin in 1937. And I followed the academic courses at Latin. Following that, I enrolled in John Carroll University in Cleveland and then attended John Carroll through 1939, at which time I dropped out to work. After the war, I came back and enrolled again in John Carroll under the GI Bill and got a degree in philosophy in 1947 with a major in history, a minor in sociology. That constitutes my education. For employment, as a youngster, I was employed delivering part-time with neighbor boys, delivering shopping news, which went to the entire neighborhood, and what we called the early bird deliveries that were delivered like at 5 a.m. in the morning, all through summer and winter. I also, when I was in about the 5th grade, I started selling scorecards at League Park in Cleveland for Cleveland Indian ball games. I did that. I sold scorecards from through the remainder of grammar school into high school. In 1933, the ball club, they built a new stadium in Cleveland and they moved it to Cleveland Stadium. When I first started selling cards, they were a nickel, and we got paid 1/4 cent a card. I told my children sometimes I never made card fare and it was only 2 cents. Then I went at the stadium. The cards went to a dime, and I made 1/2 cent a card after that time. Later on, my brother came and sold cards with me. Let's see. After that, I also worked. When I was going to college, I worked part-time at Fisher Brothers grocery chain in Cleveland on nights and weekends. Not much night, mostly it'd be weekends, Saturday and Sundays. That was before supermarkets were, the clerks had to wait on all the customers, write up everything, total it, and bag the articles. Then we had, when I went to work an uncle of mine got me an interview at a company called Thompson Products in Cleveland, which was a huge factory making automotive machine parts and aircraft parts. And I failed the physical. I found out I had a bilateral hernia, and I had to get an operation. So my dad got me on the railroad as a sort of a shipping clerk in the yards at Collinwood, Ohio, and I worked for 50 cents an hour there for about maybe 4 months, and saved all that money and used it to get surgery. If I remember right, my surgical bill was $75 for the surgery, and I can't remember what the hospital bill was at this time. When I finished and recovered from that, I went back to Thompson's, and they hired me, and I was hired as a bench inspector in the aircraft parts division. The starting salary was 75 cents an hour. I stayed with Thompson Products through the time of Pearl Harbor. Well, first of all, I had to register for the draft when I turned 21 in 1941. In November 1941, I turned 21. I registered for the draft. I also at the time of Pearl Harbor, I tried to enlist in the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard, and the Army. And no one would accept me because of my eyesight. I was wearing glasses, which I started wearing in at the 7th grade in grammar school. And I had 2100 vision corrected to 20/20 with glasses. But it was not acceptable to any of the armed services at that time. And I was told, you better just go and wait for the draft, and you'll be in a special service company. So I continued working at Thompson's. I was working a swing shift, 3 to 11, 7 days a week, from the start until the time I was classified 1A. And shortly, about 2 months after I registered, the company thought I should try and get a deferment because of the defense industry. And I thought, well, if I can't get any of the services, I must just stay and try and get a deferment for at least a while. I applied and got a 6-month deferment. And after working for that period of time, I decided I wouldn't try for another deferment, and I was qualified 1A in 1942. I think it was long about in maybe August of 1942, and I received the first draft notice in September of 1942. After I was classified 1A, after reporting for the draft, it was, I think, around September 20th, I went to, with a group of people from the neighborhood. There were some two people from the 2 draft boards. I have a photograph from the newspaper at home. And I imagine there was about 40 to 50 men in that group. And we all were taken downtown Cleveland and put on a train and went to Camp Perry, Ohio, which was the induction center on Lake Erie, just northwest of Toledo, Ohio. At Camp Perry, we went through all the physicals. We had a mental test there, and then we're outfitted with all our gear, our uniforms, and all that type of thing. I think we stayed at Camp Perry about maybe a week, and then a group of us were pulled out and boarded a train, and it was going south, and we wound up at Camp Campbell, Kentucky, in October of 42. We were the first troops to arrive at, that is, a group of draftees were arriving at Camp Campbell at that time, and found out we were going into the 12th Armored Division. When we arrived at Campbell, we were taken to the huge field house there, where we were giving a battery of tests to see how we would be acclimated for the Armored Division type of work. And at that time, after all those tests, I thought, well, I wound up with an MOS number as a rifleman. We also learned that the division was all formed. There was no slots for anybody except for the routine GIs. All the officers were there on the site, all the non-coms, and all those people were already in place at Campbell. When we got to our barracks, there were brand new barracks. There was still sawdust on the floor from the construction. And I found out that after going through the tests at Campbell, I was assigned to the reconnaissance company of the 43rd Armored Regiment. And maybe it was, I think the complement was filled in about a week after we were at Campbell. The 43rd Recon Company was filled. And then we began our basic training, constituted we'd fall out every morning at 6 o'clock for reveille, have roll call, then go back in, change clothes, have breakfast, or did a little exercises, have breakfast, then come back out and go through another routine and working on the vehicles and various things like that. Our day was mostly every day was physical exercises and going through that type of thing. Then we went through the basics of learning our weapons, and going on the firing range, and qualifying with the rifle and the submachine gun and all the weapons. We also had to take driving lessons and learning. In the Recon Company, we didn't have any tanks. We just had our vehicles were what we called peeps. Since everybody refers to them as Jeeps, we didn't have any armored cars, which we were supposed to have. Instead of armored cars, we had scout cars, which were basically the same configuration as a half track, except that there were wheels, 4 wheels in the back instead of tracks, and it was armored the same way. And we would use those in our columns instead of the armored cars. We didn't see the armored cars until after Tennessee maneuvers. From there, through our whole basic training, the thing that's, I remember my parents came down and visited me, like I'll say it was in November of that year, shortly after Thanksgiving. They came and spent a weekend down at, they came into Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and they came out to the base and had a weekend visit with my parents. My dad, having been a railroader, they had free transportation on any railroad in the country. So after then, I was able to get a furlough, a 3-day pass after Christmas, and I took the train to Cleveland on from Nashville, not Nashville, but from Clarksville to Cleveland on the L&N, and then into Cleveland. Into Cincinnati on the L&N, and then into Cleveland on I think it was the B&O. Coming back, I missed a connection in Louisville on the train, and knew I was going to be late from the 3-day pass. So I had the good sense to call my first sergeant at Campbell, and he first chewed me up and said, "Yeah, you ought to thank us for the fact that you had the sense enough to call and let us know." So that was my first time I thought I would be disciplined. As it was, he didn't give me any company punishment or anything else. It just said, since you advised us of your problem, we accept the excuse and we think it's valid. Let me see now after that. Well, incidentally, 2 of my friends in the neighborhood were drafted with me that wound up in the 12th Armored. One of them, Carl Cernxis, wound up in the 43rd Regiment as a tank driver, and the other, Bernie Mannion, wound up in the 66th Armored Infantry. From that day, I saw them at Camp Campbell a couple of times, and then when we shipped out for maneuvers, I never saw them again. Carl, I found out, was just before we went on maneuvers, he was transferred and went to North Africa as a replacement to the 1st Armored Division. And the other Bernie, I never saw Bernie again. And I never saw him after the war. So those are the only 2 people that I knew going into Campbell that I knew beforehand. And of course, we made friends with my companions there in the reconnaissance company. On Tennessee maneuvers, let's see, when did that take place? We went down there. First, before going to maneuvers, we went on a field trip through Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. Just our troop. We went spent about a 4-day trip, a driving trip to Mammoth Cave, and spent that time at Mammoth. Had slept in the field with our pup tents, and we didn't have sleeping bags then. We had just blankets and stuff. And a kitchen went and everything, so we had this field trip for about 3 or 4 days into Kentucky. When we come back, maybe it was a month later, we went on Tennessee maneuvers. And maneuvers was down in the field in the Cumberland River area. And the maneuvers lasted, I think, 7 or 8 weeks. We'd have a problem each week. There was a blue force and a red force in the maneuver area, and we were in the Blue Army. The 12th Armored was in the Blue Army, and in this recon company we were with, we would have to front the 43rd Armored Regiments usually, and we'd start out on a problem like on a Monday morning, and we would be casualties by maybe this first or second day. And when you were casualties, you were supposed to go to some area in the maneuvers, were a designated area where you were to wait till the problem was over. Well, we were free as a bird because we had the vehicle, the Jeep, and there'd be 3 of us there, and we would just take off and drive around the countryside in the hill country of Kentucky, run up to a farm and get somebody to fix us some fried chicken, pay the fried chicken, go out and picnic, and we would do that for a couple of days, and then show up at the designated area about maybe Thursday night or so of the week that the maneuver problem. After each maneuver problem, a certain number of people could go into Nashville on a pass over just a 1-night pass. You would go in, it would be on Saturday, you'd go in like at 9 o'clock in the morning on trucks, then you had to be at an area in Nashville to be picked up to take it back to the maneuver area after, say, around 9 p.m. or so. If you missed the truck, you're arrested and put in jail, or held in Nashville. So you had to be at the trucks. Each unit sent their trucks in to pick up their men that went in on these one-day passes. Nashville was overrun with GIs. When you'd go in there, Nashville, I think the population might have been about, say, 75 or 80,000 population in Nashville. Then there'd be 100,000 guys in there on these passes. So it was just wall-to-wall soldiers in Nashville. Not a very pleasant place to be. But you could be just as well out in camp or in the maneuver area. So I don't know how the residents of Nashville could tolerate all that traffic in retrospect. So let me think after that. And after maneuvers, which went for 7 weeks, that's when we were told that the division was going to be reorganized and that we were going to become the 92nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. We were no longer in the 43rd. We were made D Troop of the 92nd. We received a CO, a new CO, just before we went on maneuvers. Our original CO was relieved of command and moved out. Later found out that he was disciplined because his superiors didn't think he could handle problems with some of the men, because we had quite a few guys that were tried to get out of the company. A group went AWOL at Christmas time, and another group applied for the Air Force, for the paratroopers and things like that. I had 2 good friends that did get out and went to the Air Force that were in our recon company there. They wound up being pilots, and I corresponded with one for quite a while. But they went into Air Force training. So we had 3 fellows that I personally knew that did that. Then when we were finished maneuvers, we were boarded on trains down there in the hill country of Tennessee. Oh, I couldn't say one good thing. Slow down. Okay. Is that all right now? No.
That should be fine.
Okay.
It's not
Okay.
stuff. Okay.
I said that we became casualties right off. A couple of us, I remember, we got captured about the second day of the problem, and we were held in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and we didn't have vehicles or anything else. And I remember we had to sleep on the sidewalks in Murfreesboro while these guys were muscled us around in Murfreesboro, our red enemy there. Also, we had river crossing problems that we did. Learned how to go across the rivers on the pontoon bridges. That was part of the training aspect on the maneuvers. We had not done that before. So then back to where I left off when we went to going to Barclay on the train. I can't remember whether we got our new vehicles before we left the armored cars, before we left maneuver area, or we got them assigned to us. I think they were delivered to us at Camp Barclay, where we got rid of the scout cars and we actually received the new armored cars, which were a vehicle that had I don't know, I think it was what they call a twin Packard engine was the engine in the armored car. I'm not sure of that. I'm sure somebody will dispute me if it's not right. And it was a 6-wheel vehicle, 4-wheel drive in the rear and 2 in the front steering. Had a crew of 4, a driver, an assistant driver, a commander, and a radio operator. The radios in the armored cars were almost all CW radios, where they did the key transmitted with a key. We had small voice radios that were in the Jeeps or Peeps, and also voice radios in the armored cars. But they didn't carry far. The signal from the armored car could probably go, I'd say maybe 15 or 20 miles. I'm not sure. We found out they didn't go very far once we were in Germany once in a while. But then our training program sort of changed down there in Barclay after we arrived there. The terrain was totally different than it was up in Tennessee. It was sort of desert-like in one sense because there's cactus and rough hill country, and we did a lot of driving around the countryside down there on problems. we really thought when we left the maneuver area we were going to go to the desert and have desert training, but that did not occur. But essentially it was just getting to know the new vehicles and the driver on down there. And I can't remember how long we were at Barclay until, let's see. Yeah, I said our new CO was assigned in September 43. I talked about the that's where after Barclay we were in the new formation, right? Okay. Now I see my notes. In Barclay, we started on it. We got a new platoon leader at Camp Barclay. His name was he joined us just before maneuvers, but came from the Air Force. His name was Lieutenant Duca. Was our platoon leader, and I was in the 3rd platoon at that time. I was originally in the 1st platoon in the recon, and then I moved to the 2nd platoon, and now after Barclay, I wound up in the 3rd platoon. Also, I was promoted to PFC shortly after I got to Barclay, and I was sent to radio school there at Barclay. And it was not to learn CW, but maybe it was just to learn how to operate a radio that was in the Jeeps. Didn't like it. We had weekly field problems at Barclay from November 43 through July 44. In March of 44, we received a bunch of new men in the division that were from ASTP. The ASTP was the Army Special Training Program, and these were young fellas, mostly younger than us, that had all been in college in various schools in Texas and in the Southwest. And in Detroit, I think we got about 10 new men that were from ASTP. 2 I remember for certain were identical twins. Their name was Carl and Joe Meyer, that were assigned to us. And they were born and raised in Germany. They were of Jewish extraction and lived in San Francisco. And they were a pair. They spoke fluent German and were really enjoyable fellas. And during the war, they became very valuable, and they wound up in G2 as interrogators for the Army. The Meyer brothers did. I've seen them after the war, both of them, since I live out west. Let's see. Pardon? Oh, I forgot to mention the concept, the division, the way we were set up, the 92nd. We had after the new concept of the 92nd, we had 4 troops of recon. A, B, C, and D were the recon troops. Then we had E troop, which was a self-propelled howitzer troop, and F company, a light tank troop. Some of our people that were in the 43rd Recon wound up in E troop, since they told us that they had training in those howitzers while we were at Barclay, but I don't remember that. But they would know more than I would. But I think about maybe 10 or 12 of our fellows wound up in E troop from the 43rd, and I don't know whether some were transferred out or not. I don't remember what happened to all of them, but most of us wound up in D troop with their same officers and same non-coms. Let's see. I got a furlough home at the end of that time. We were in July of 44, I think it was. I went to home and let's see, that's where we began going on, and we began going on 20 and 25 and 30-mile full field hikes on every Saturday while we were towards the end of our training there in Barclay. And we were preparing for shipment overseas, is what we were told. Also, we had this, I began to tell you about the physical ed training with this officer. He had Lieutenant Duca, who was a real stickler for calisthenics. He had trained a group of Air Force people for about maybe a year or 2 years at an Air Force base in calisthenics. I'm sure he was and had a background as an athlete. He also drilled us, our little group, in the speed of driving to a point with your Jeep, dismounting, taking the 60 millimeter mortar, and setting it up and zeroing in on a position. And he timed us with a stopwatch to see who could do it the fastest. And we got pretty skilled at doing that. I was in a scout section group in this platoon. So then I got a furlough home at that same time, where I went back to Cleveland on the train, and to get out of what was the city there, Abilene, we would have to go from the camp into Abilene, and then take a train to Fort Worth or Dallas, and then go north from there. But the train was so slow that went to Abilene that most of us would take it was like a taxi service. And even if you went on leave to Fort Worth, people would do this. They would go in and take these individual cars. We'd sign up at some little hotel there in Abilene, and people would come by and take carloads of people to the designated town, usually to Fort Worth. And it would cost you about $5 or something like that to take the trip to Fort Worth. Because if you took the train or a bus, it would be forever and a day to get there. So that was the mode of operation for getting out of Abilene. We would go into Abilene for a day on the weekends or so, but Abilene was a dry town. You couldn't. Once you left the base at Camp Barkley, you couldn't get a beer unless you went to Sweetwater, Texas, or to Fort Worth. So we did not stay in Abilene. The most of us. If we stayed in, we stayed in the base and go to the PX and get our beers. Also, I remember at that same, this is a unique thing, I don't know if everybody would, on Saturday night when we'd be drinking beer in the PX, when we knew it was going to close, we'd all go through the line. You had to go through the line, pay, and each guy could take 2 bottles. And we'd keep going through the line to him, and had a case outside, filled up the case of beer, then take it over to our company area and set it up in the latrine, and we'd drink the beer until maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, finish it off at the latrine. The beer wasn't power, it was 3.2 beer, I believe. It was not 6 or 7% beer as you have today. That was one little facet of our entertainment. Also, another form of entertainment there was the movies. We had Post movies at 3 or 4 movie houses on the Post. We went to the movies on weekends. So as I said, Abilene, in my opinion, wasn't much of a fun town. Going to Fort Worth, we would take these taxi vehicles to get to Fort Worth, and we'd have in Fort Worth there was a little more activity. There would be nightclubs or bars that we would go to, or else if you could get over to Dallas, the same thing. I had a friend that was in Fort Hood, Texas, and we met twice in Fort Worth. He'd come up from Fort Hood, I went in there, and we would party in Fort Worth for a weekend. He would be on a 2-day pass or something like that, and I would be on a 2-day pass or 3-day pass from Camp Barkley. I think we did that twice. Then also at that same time frame I mentioned, I went on a 2-week furlough to Cleveland, and I remember the railroads taking trains in those days. You were lucky if you could get a seat, because the trains were just jam-packed. Even though the GIs going on furlough were supposed to have say priorities on getting aboard, but it was difficult. And I know I stood, I boarded the train in Fort Worth, and I stood all the way to Oklahoma City, and then maybe could get a seat or sit on the floor after Oklahoma City someplace. And the train I took from Oklahoma City would go from Oklahoma City into Chicago on the Rock Island, and then I'd catch the New York Central from Chicago into Cleveland. I had done that a number of times. I had a cousin in Chicago, and we would go up to visit them quite often from Cleveland on my dad's railroad pass. So that I was very familiar with Chicago. And I did visit my cousin there. I forgot to say that when I was in Camp Campbell. Went once up to Chicago to visit her. Then in Cleveland, we happened to arrive there at the weekend of my sister's wedding. I wasn't sure of the dates, I know. And I wound up being in the wedding party because my then brother-in-law's brother, they had a big party the night before the wedding, and he got thrown in jail, and they had to get somebody to replace him, and it was me. So I was part of the wedding party. So after that weekend, I returned back to Camp Barkley, and I don't think I was back there maybe a week or two when we were alerted for overseas, and we had to pack all our vehicles on railroad flat cars and cover them, certain parts of them with heavy duty grease and that type of thing for the shipment overseas. We didn't know where we were going when we left Camp Barkley. Once the vehicles were all packed, then we had to maybe wait around 3 or 4 days, and we all boarded Pullman cars for points east. And understanding with other fellas, we took various routes, and it just so happened that ours went the same route that I had just been on the furlough. Went through Fort Worth, up to Oklahoma City, up to Chicago east on New York Central all the way to New York. And then on that train, everybody, we had to have, somebody had to outpost the cars. We'd had to have a guard at each end of the car. And we all had Pullman berths on the train, upper and lower. And the porters that ran the Pullman company, had one porter on each car, and they helped us put the bed down and all that stuff. I can't recall how long it took. I would say the trip from Barkley to New York was at least 5 days, maybe 6 days on the train. And we had got, I don't remember how we had fed, whether we had K rations or what we had, but I'm sure it was something like that. We had K rations. At each stop we would, not every time, but we would dismount, get off the train, do calisthenics at the siding, and then get back on the train. Also, I had an idea that I wanted, if I could get into Cleveland, I know we'd go through Cleveland, I knew the route we'd go, and I knew my father could come up to see the train if he knew what time or when it would be there, because the New York Central, the way they would ran a crew from Chicago, the same crew from Chicago to Cleveland. They would change the equipment, put a new engine on, new crew, and new everything, and then go the rest of the way to Buffalo and do it again. So I volunteered for all the guard duty on our train from about Toledo into Cleveland. So that was maybe about a 2-hour trip or maybe 3-hour trip. I can't recall exactly now. But on the guard duty, I thought if the train made a stop someplace in the yards or something, why I could just jump off and get into a phone booth and call my parents in Cleveland, tell them, be at the Collinwood yards, this train is coming in. Probably I could estimate the time. Maybe. Go ahead. I'll get this here. Is that all right now? So that's what I did. I took over the guard duty on our car from that point on. And when we came into Cleveland, the way the railroad was set up then, it was electrified from the west side through the downtown area, and then the steam engine would be put on, a new steam engine in Collinwood Yards. They'd remove it and put electric on. Well, because this came in through the freight system, we didn't do that, and it came down through what we'd call in Cleveland the flats, and came to a bridge over the river that they would raise and then and lower. When we got down there, this is still with the locomotive, so we didn't go with the electric. We got down there, and the bridge was out, but we had to stand and wait there for about, I'd say we were waiting there a good hour. And I looked all over that yard trying to see where I could find a phone or something, and there was nothing there. And this was like about, I'll say 8:30, 9 o'clock was night. It was dark, and I knew that if I could just get a phone to call my home, that my dad would be out there where we would switch cars, because it was only about 5 minutes from their house. And he had worked there, and he knew the area very well. But anyhow, it didn't happen. I couldn't get to a phone. So when we got into Cleveland at the Collinwood Yards, I prevailed upon the conductor to call my parents. I gave them the phone numbers, said call them and tell them how long we're going to be here. Maybe they can get over here. Because we had a fellow in my outfit that the same thing happened to him in the Chicago area where we stopped in Blue Island, and his father was actually in the yards there working in Blue Island in Illinois where the train went through Chicago, and his dad was the yardmaster at Blue Island, and his dad actually got off the train and had a little reunion with his family there in the railroad yard. His name was Bob Brown. But anyhow, in Cleveland, I wasn't lucky like Bob Brown was. And the conductor did call my father, and what he told him was that the train is going to be leaving here in about 15 minutes. I don't think you'll have a chance to do any good if you came over here. So they didn't go, and instead we wound up being there for over 2 hours, and they could have easily made it. And when we left there, then we went on. There was none. Well, we stopped in Buffalo and changed crews there, and then on into New York, where we wound up at Camp Shanks, up the Hudson from, I guess maybe 30 miles up the Hudson, New York City, on the east side of the Hudson River, or the west side of the Hudson River, I beg your pardon. And at Shanks, it was the port of embarkation camp, and we were locked down pretty good, although what they had us doing there once we arrived was we went on marches every day, usually with full field pack and running just to keep in shape, like we weren't at that point. Also, when we disembarked, we were told that once we got settled in Shanks, that they would let 50% of the people go on a pass the first night we were there, and then 50% the second night. They figured that they would, the first 50 would be local fellas that were from the New York area or Philadelphia, or places where they could get home. And the pass would be good for like 24 hours. They left at like 9 in the morning and were due back the next morning at Reveille. So they could easily get into New York City from Shanks and then take a subway wherever they wanted to go in the New York area, train over to Philadelphia or over to Newark or Jersey or wherever because we had a lot of Eastern fellows in the outfit. So what happened is that night while we were at Shanks, we had maybe been there 4 days when we got these passes, a hurricane hit. And there was a tremendous storm. All transportation was stopped in New York. Half the fellows that went in didn't get home or get to where they wanted to go because of the rain and the flooding. Trees were falling down in the camp, and there was just a terrific mess from the hurricane. So the next day we had to help clean up the area and stuff, and here the guys came back. And they were all complaining over the fact that they didn't really get to where they were trying to go. But the rest of us got to go in the next night. And that night I went in, we partied, and I remember we went to, a group of us went to I think it was I can't think of the name of the club now, where they had a big stage show, and then we got on the stage and danced with some of the people at this nightclub in New York. I want to say it was the Stork. It wasn't the Stork Club, it was another club. But anyhow, that's what we partied that night because we figured it was our last shot at doing that. And came back. Remember, we had a guy that was a local New York guy that was trying to show us around, but I think we drank him under the table after about 2 or 3 hours of night clubbing in New York. And we did get back in time for Reveille in the morning. We just got back on the last ferry across the river and up to Shanks. But while in New York, I called my folks and said, we were alerted. We didn't know when we were going to ship out, but it was going to come, and I couldn't forecast it. I said, we're going to get these passes. They told us half each night. So I said, the next night I can go in. It'd be the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow I can be in New York again on a pass. If you want to come up to New York on the train, they could come up with their railroad passes. I said, if you decide to come, I'll be in New York, and I'll be at in the lobby at the Commodore Hotel in New York, which is right across from Grand Central. So I didn't get to go into New York because we were alerted then right about 2 hours after we got back that morning, and we were told we were going to get ready to ship out. As a matter of fact, then D Troop got assigned to board the ship first, we had aboard the ship there it was at the 42nd Street Pier in New York. We took us down on a train into New York and crossed the river. Remember crossing the river there, and you got into the pen area where the ship was tied up. There was a huge pen there of German POWs, and those guys hadn't had a bath for 6 months because they were all just. I looked like about 1,000 of them there in a caged pen on the pier in New York, and the odor was horrendous. Anyhow, our little group boarded the ship, and nobody else was on it. We were the only ones on, and we had pulled guard duty for the ship. And so here we are on the ship. We had, I don't know if the whole 92nd pulled the guard duty, but I know we had it. And we had to patrol certain parts of the deck in the ship. The ship was the Tasker H. Bliss, the General Tasker H. Bliss. It was a MSTS vessel belonging to the Military Sea Transport Service. And all the crew, that is it was an officer, a full bird colonel, that was commander of the ship, and he had a crew of officers and non-coms that ran the ship. And then they did have some seamen that were regular seamen also on this ship, but it was a military transport. We later found out we were lucky to have that because we had good food on that ship, and good the way it was served and everything was excellent compared to some of the others that were on British transports and other things from the division that had some horrible experiences. But anyhow, back to waiting. Here we are on the pier at 42nd Street. My parents are just up the river in the hotel, and the officers could get off the ship and go into New York, but they kept a couple of non-coms and the GIs on. We couldn't leave the ship, so we had to stay aboard until the whole thing was filled. Then they began boarding everybody the next day, and until we filled up. And I think we sailed about the let's see, was it the 20th or so, where we sailed on a convoy for Europe. Sorry about that. Got the paper screwed up here. Okay. That was on the 20th that we were that we boarded the ship, September 20th. And the ship sailed on the 21st with this convoy headed for Europe. I remember when we were at sea, once we got out of New York Harbor and saw the Statue of Liberty leaving us behind, and start feeling the roll of the sea the first time. I went, oh boy, are we going to get seasick or not? And I had some queasy sensations, but I did get seasick. Some of the guys did. Some wound up in bed, never got out till we got over there. And the ship had the configuration where we were 6 high and down in the hold on bunks. So you're laying like as you're prone. The guy ahead of you, his backside was in your face and went down 6 high like that. So I don't know how many people would be aboard that ship, but the holds were that thing. So then we would take turns on deck, going up, getting some exercises and some air and that type of stuff. The whole group couldn't be on deck at one time. There wasn't enough room on deck. In the convoy going across, is all you could see on the horizon was ships. It was a huge convoy, destroyers and destroyer escorts and other vessels in this convoy. It was a very large convoy. And we first told us we were going to go to Le Havre, and then en route they found out that the orders had been changed and we were going to dock in England instead. And we went into, I think, what day did we land? At a port at Bristol, England. Whitehorn was the name of the town, actual village, but I remember the English men there while we were unloading the ship. My first introduction to the English laborers at the dock workers, yelling, it's tea time, and they all sat down and had their cup of tea. And we had to wait till they finished their tea break before we could unload. So we stayed, when they moved us from the dock area on a train up to an area called Tidworth Barracks, which was an old English base, and they were all tent configurations there. They were 10-man tents, and we received our vehicles there, and we had to degrease them and all that stuff, clean everything up. And we did a little bit of calisthenics type of thing, and not much field work or that, but it was mainly we're cleaning everything up, getting ready to go over across the channel. I think how long we stay there. Oh, also we were able to get passes to London from there. We could get like a 24-hour pass into London, because we would go in and stay overnight and come back, or maybe it was a 3-day pass. But I remember this last, we went in twice to London, and enjoyed going to Covent Garden, where we ice skated, met some girls, danced, partied, and did that type of thing. Remember taking a couple of them home on the London subway, and they lived way out in I can't think of the section of London, but we get out there, and their mothers were there waiting for them at the end of the subway, and we had to say our goodbyes and head back to the hotel downtown. We also, is that not getting too long?
No.
No? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Covent Garden is what I said is the most memorable experience in London, was going to Covent Garden. Both from the music point of view, the big bands that played there, and then the ice skating rink. All this is under one roof. It's quite a facility.
Any big band names you're...
That they were there then, no, but we used to listen to Glenn Miller, of course, on the radio and that type of stuff. These bands that played there were English bands, but they played that sound. They played the swing music. They didn't play, the English did that. They had real good bands. And we stayed in Red Cross hotels in London, and I recall also while we were there, a V2 hit in not too far away from us. A V2 was the rockets that the Germans sent in. And we'd get the alert after the thing had hit. That the air raid could not get going. Then on the 14th of October is when we left Tidworth Barracks in our vehicles and drove down to a loading area where we all boarded LSTs. I don't remember the name of the town we left from, but we just drove right up the vehicles right into the LST and got on the LST. And then when they were all boarded, we went across the channel in a convoy. And we had to stay outside, I'd say for Le Havre for about 2 days, 3 days. We'll all wait until before we could unload. And when we left the LST, we drove into the French countryside there, and it was raining like heck. And we had a bivouac and just park our vehicles and set up our tents and try and get some sleep. We maybe stayed in that area 2 or 3 days, and then the 92nd got an assignment that we were taken out of the division, and we were sent to patrol the Normandy coast, where we learned that the Germans had maybe 25,000, 30,000 troops that had evacuated the Cherbourg Peninsula after the invasion, and they were holed up on the Jersey and Guernsey Islands out there in just off the coast of France. And you could see the two islands. They were just maybe 10 miles off the coast, maybe not even that far. So each company would get a different day to patrol the coast. I remember we went from San Malo on one end all the way up to Cherbourg on the other, and we would be maybe 10 minutes behind the vehicles in front of us. And we would there'd be 2 jeeps and an armored car going down these roads. And then we would be off. We could go back to where we were bivouacked and wait till our turn came around again. So it was about every 3rd or 4th day that we would get this assignment to go on this patrol. And then we were free. I remember also while we were there, when it left, and they let us go out to St. Michael's, Mount St. Michael's. I don't know if you ever heard of that. That's a huge monastery that's on a rock just off the Normandy coast there. That's you can't get out there at high tide because the road is covered with water. So you'd have to wait for low tide. You could drive out, park the car, and go in it's both a town at the base of the monastery and then this huge church and monastery there. My wife and I happened to tour that 2 years ago, and we were over there and went out there again and saw the thing. Saw this time. Now the road you don't have to worry about the high tide or anything. You have it taken care of where you can go out there now. But then it was, you had to be careful. And also you couldn't get in, and you had to go through a little hole in the wall once you got out there. At that time in 1940 to 44. Let's see. Now then, from there, then we were taken off of that detail, and we had to join the division that was over in the 7th Army region of France. They first told us we were going to the 9th Army, then they wound up being assigned to the 7th Army, and they were ready to go into combat in eastern France, in the Sarre region of France is where we were assigned. I can't think of the name of the town. I think it was Rohrbach was the first city we were supposed to go into. So the recon, we could hear the artillery fire and that type of stuff, but we weren't in any action there. Some of the units were in action there for the first time in the Rohrbach area. Also, I recall what impressed us mostly about the Normandy area, that everything was leveled. Every building, every farmhouse, everything you saw was just in shambles, just total destruction, just devastating. I wonder how anybody survived, any of the civilians ever survived in that area from the thing. I said, my notes here say there was 50,000 Germans holed up. I don't really know. In the first couple of weeks of December, after we were committed to the 7th Army, we were assigned these counter-recon screens where we'd set up at certain road junctions and bridges or that type of stuff and just cover them in the case that there was some major retreat. The enemy were attacking, and our guys had to fall back, and so they'd leave us there to sort of hold things off, but never occurred. So we never really fired a shot or done anything along those lines until then. We moved out of that region and we got sent down to Herrlisheim, where the division encountered, as you probably know, the worst thing that could happen, where they were just so overwhelmed by the German forces that we had no knowledge of the German strength in that area. And so we in our D troop, we didn't get assigned. The other companies got assigned to the various combat commands at Herrlisheim, but I don't recall us getting any assignments except we were way back in this big open field, snow all over the place, and we were in foxholes. We dug, and the closest one to us was about 20 yards that way and 20 yards to the right, left. We could, and in the fog and stuff, we could of course hardly see each other, but we were supposed to stay there and hold the fort in case there was any breakthrough with the Germans. And we just didn't see anything. I recall seeing a German patrol go through at night, and we're not shooting nothing, we're just let them go through. They were all dressed in white clothing, and they went through in mass. There was probably about a 30-man patrol of Germans, and they went between two of our foxholes, just went right, took their walk, and they didn't come back. They went back another route, apparently. While there also, we lost 3 guys that were captured out of a foxhole. And we had a lieutenant that was assigned to us before we went in there, who was our platoon leader, and he took off. We never knew what happened to that guy. You never had an officer in our platoon after that. So he bugged out. He was a replacement had been in another division, had been wounded and was evacuated to England, and then came back and was assigned to us. That's what we learned later, but rumors are rampant. What I don't even remember the man's name, but he left. So we were without an officer from then until the end of the war in our platoon. At least as long as I was there. I didn't finish the war there. After that, Herrlisheim, as I said, the D Troop's activity there was not as severe as some of the other troops I know. We were very fortunate. We were relieved. We were the last ones to pull out, though. The 36th Infantry relieved us, and they came up and took over some of our foxholes, and then we pulled out of there and moved out of that area and went into into sort of Army Reserve for a couple of weeks. And then about the 1st of February, we were moved down to the Colmar Pocket region. And down there, the 12th was committed, and they were supposed to close the gap on the Colmar Pocket campaign, where the Germans had this big bridgehead across the Rhine that they had taken. And our deal there was to just sort of cover a couple of bridges and that type of stuff. I remember taking a patrol out where we hit a bridge was all mined and that type of stuff, and we had to call the engineers to take the disarm all the munitions around this bridge. Let me see what I got here now.
Let's hold on 1 second.
The 12th, we didn't know we were part of the 21st Corps, and the 21st Corps was reassigned to the French First Army. And the 21st Corps had, I think, 3 infantry divisions, the 45th, the 3rd, and the 63rd, and then the 12th Armored. And we were detached from the 7th Army and moved over under the command of the French for the Colmar Pocket campaign. And the French ran that campaign. Now, our assignment there basically was armor support for the 2 infantry divisions. And then part of our division were the first troops that, I guess, were able to get into Colmar and liberate the city. As I said, we were on the outskirts along some railroad area, just sort of doing a little scouting around. Didn't see any Germans, but saw their evidence around in the area where they had this bridge mined and things like that. Then I also recall that I was sent on a patrol to meet French forces. And I came out and I met this guy from the French 10th Mountain, I'm not sure the mountain division, but they were all Algerians, all black Algerians. And they were armed to the teeth, those guys. They wore the full-length OD coats, and rifles, bandoliers of ammunition, grenades all over the place. And also a big sword going through their waist, but they were pretty rugged guys. We heard a lot of stories about them, how they, on patrol, they would just be able to sneak up on anybody and either capture or kill the enemy by feeling around to see what the shape of the helmet was while they were in their foxholes, because they could tell the configuration of a German helmet versus an American helmet. So, but that was the reputation that these Algerians had. But this guy he couldn't speak English, I couldn't speak French, but he said, "Hello, Joe. Got a cigarette, Joe?" Yeah, a cigarette. That was about the end of the conversation, but he had to go back to his troops, and I went back to ours and told them that this was the French force where they were, and put it on the map to our CO where the Germans were, or where the Moroccan group was in this area outside of Colmar. I can't remember whether it was south or north of the city, because we had circled the whole city. That occurred like the first week of February. We were in the Colmar area, and then again we went to the sort of into a reserve. They moved us out of there up to I don't know if I better remember. This is where we got some new equipment. We got these issued shoe packs. I don't know what the shoe packs were. We used to be wearing these leather shoes with leggings. And shoe packs were a new issue that the Army had, where you got, they were leather-topped rubber soles, big double thick wool socks with an inner sole that went in the shoe. So super warm, and you could keep your feet dry thoroughly. So we all got issued shoe packs right at that time. And so we had these new combat coats that came in, but they only had a few of them, and so they had to have a drawing to see who got these coats. They were a shell. The outer shell was like an OD color of the rain gear material, and the inside was white. It was reversible. And then under that, you wore like a vest-like sheepskin and wool inner coating that went down to above the knees. It was about above, just halfway between the knees and the thighs. That was the length, and then the OD part of it went a little lower than that. So being reversible, you could go on patrols in the snow and not be seen and so on. That was the purpose of that. But the snow all melted. So the snow all melted after Colmar. Let's see, 1st of February, that's her. After Colmar, we moved back up to the Saar region, and we were billeted in the town of Hambach. And while there, we were still got passes to go to various cities, and they had most people were going into Nancy, which was maybe 20 miles away, and could go in there on a overnight or a 2-day pass. I can't recall which. But then they had available, they were going to send some people to, the division was, so told us, to Brussels, that we'd be the first American troops in Brussels on leave if we got selected. So they had in the 92nd, they drew the companies who they were going to send 2 enlisted men from the 92nd on this, and 1 officer, I believe, on this deal, or else the officer coming from something else. But what they did, they they had a drawing. And D Troop, one of the enlisted men, they drew my name, and I got the pass to Brussels. And the pass didn't start till you hit the city of Brussels, and we were way south in the Alsace. So we had to report to division headquarters just as we were dressed in our old dirty ODs and carrying a rifle, and got on a truck, and we went to Nancy first, and we were billeted in Nancy overnight, and then there was 2 truckloads of GIs and 2 officer on each truck. And we left Nancy, and the next day we got to Reims, and we were Reims the next night, billeted in Reims, and there we left the following morning and headed into Mons, Belgium. Got into Mons the next night. Our 3rd night was in Mons, and while in Mons we had to convert our currency from French francs into Belgian francs. And then they would stamp our papers to say that you had cashed so much money. They didn't stamp our papers. So I'll tell you a story what happened. But anyhow, I didn't know anybody in this group, but it was all complete strangers. But I sort of buddied up with a guy from the 66th. I never saw him since, or didn't even remember his name. But we went into Brussels, and we were taken right to a quartermaster depot there, where they ran us through a big portable shower place where we could get all cleaned up. We come out the other side, totally clean, no clothes, and they issued a complete new uniform to us from top to bottom, with new ODs, new trousers, new underwear, everything, a barracks bag, and we got Eisenhower jackets, and just a whole total new-looking soldiers. And they wanted us to look this way because we were the first American troops that were ever in Brussels. And so the Red Cross took us over at that point, and they took us to and billeted us in the Metropole Hotel in Brussels, where we had first-class treatment. We had 2 men to a room, 2 big double rooms, just gorgeous hotel. 3 good meals a day down in the dining room there. Anything we wanted to be ordered. I can't remember. I don't think we had drinks. I just can't. Maybe we had a little wine. I don't remember. Then they had tea time there. We'd be there for tea time and have tea and their pastries and so on. So, as I said, our pass didn't start till we got into Brussels. So we had 3 days of that leave in Brussels, and we had their money. And I had a little bit of extra money because at Christmas time I got a bonus from Thompson Products, a $75 bonus that they sent to all employees that were in the services. And I had that check. I hadn't cashed it, so I cashed it at the Army Finance Office in Brussels for Belgian francs. So this 66 guy and we went broke after 2 days in Brussels, and we were just stumbling around, didn't know what the hell to do. And we were sitting near a tavern there, and this man approached us and he said, "I have $300 in Dutch guilders, and I want to transfer them to Belgian francs. Can you take them to the American Finance Office and get Belgian francs for these Dutch guilders?" I said, "I don't know." He said, do you have papers? And we said, yeah. And he looked at the papers. He said, you can do it. They haven't stamped your papers. So we each took $150 worth of Dutch guilders and took it into the finance office and got Belgian francs for the money. They stamped our papers and we went back. Gave it to this guy. And then he gave us, I think I'll say, like 10% or something like that of the dough a piece. So we each had more, say, $15 in Belgian francs or something like that. I can't remember now what the exact was. But we didn't go broke. We were able to spend another day on that guy's money. And we often thought, and I thought afterwards, what we should have done is just take the money and taken a walk and not gone back to the tavern with his Belgian francs. So, but anyhow, we didn't do that, honest as we were. So that was one little incident that I'll never forget. And when the pass ended, we headed back to the same stops going back, Mons, Reims, and Nancy, and got back to the company, and they were still in the same location. They were still sending people on passes. So from that point on, we moved up to Trier, and also we had to paint out our vehicles, take off our patches, the 12th Armored Patch, take off all your identification, paid all the numbers off the vehicles, and they said we were going to be transferred over to Patton's Third Army, and we had a mission to go from Trier to the Rhine. And we were told in the recon, we were given an assignment, our recon troop, D troop was given an assignment, we don't have anybody else, but we said, you got to go from Trier to Worms and try and capture the bridge at Worms, and avoid all combat if you can. Don't just bypass the enemy, get around them, do anything, but get there as fast as you can. So we started out on this mission, and the first day we ran into a whole flock of Germans, and that were in retreat and scattered all over the countryside, and surrendering and what have you. And we just said, hey, we started, actually what happened, we left the platoon there to disarm them. I don't know what the strength was, but just it was a big group, I'd say maybe battalion strength or something like that of Germans that were trying to surrender. So our captain then decided after that, we left the whole platoon there to handle this, and he said, the heck with that, we'll just let them go. We'll just point them to the rear and we'll keep going. And then our mission was changed from Worms to Mannheim, Mannheim, and what is the other? Ludwigshafen, the bridge between those two cities on the Rhine, to move down. That the 4th Armored was coming down along the Rhine, and they were coming along too. And they were in Worms before we were going to get there. So they sent us to take Ludwigshafen and Mannheim. So this was then on the second day out, we started out again and ran into the same trouble with Germans all over the road, all in retreat, disorganized. And into this one town we came in, and they had the whole town blocked with their vehicles and tanks. And I recall one of the guys that was in the fort, we would take turns, incidentally, pointing a column by platoons. One day it would be the first platoon, one day the second platoon, and being the scout section, we would be the point. So when you're pointed, you would be out in front of everybody and try and drive evasively down the roads, and we'd go pretty fast, go maybe 50, 100 yards, stop, swear, go, and continue. And there'd be the two jeeps and or two peeps and an armored car in the first part of the column. And I would say we were moving pretty good cross country. If we ran into somebody, we'd go around the town or what have you. We just keep barreling. And on the second day out, we came through this town that was just loaded with Germans. They were all over the place, tanks, all kinds of equipment, and totally disorganized. And they ordered them to move their equipment so we could get through. We wanted to get through and beat the Russians. So they let us, they moved their stuff and everything, and we got out of the town. And out of the town, we pulled on top of a crest of a hill and just outposted both ends of the column and on the flanks, and stayed bumper to bumper on that, and spent the night up there. And then anybody that came down the road, they would capture at both ends and hold them. And then when it broke day the next morning, we took off again and left them all there and headed on. to get to the Rhine. The third day was more of the same, and only about real late on the third day, we got into almost the suburbs of Ludwigshafen. The town was, I think, was called Mutterstadt or something like that, and we started hitting some opposition where they were defending. They had set up roadblocks and things like that that they had made, and would try to stop vehicles. And this one was not manned, but they were manning it with these Panzerfaust guns. And this was actually the suburbs of Ludwigshafen. We had come through the grape country there, which is along the Rhine, through these big vineyards and that type of stuff, getting into this area with no opposition at all. Didn't see anybody. And then we got into this town of Mutterstadt, I think it was, and there was no sheets out on the sides. On all the villages we were coming through before, the towns, the civilians were showing their surrendering by throwing their bed sheets out the window, so they were white. Here we hit this town, there was nothing. And from just figuring it out, we figured the Germans were all over the place in this town, and that they were holed up in the houses and what have you. So they decided to send out patrols, dismount and send patrols out. We had this group of, they had almost knocked out our tank cars with the Panzerfaust at the roadblock, but we got into the town and decided let's send patrols and search 2 or 3 houses here and see if they're cleared. And this one Lieutenant Sheehan of ours was a group telling us what to do. He was not our platoon leader, but he was the exec officer for the troop. And he was helping us out there, and we had another lieutenant from F Company, because we had a platoon of F tanks with us, and a platoon of howitzers from E Troop in their column, and then our three platoons of recon. So that was our column. Oh, and a gas truck pulling up the rear, a gas truck, which was necessary. So we just knew that the Germans were all over the place, that we would have to do something. And so we started the search. We maybe went through 2 houses or so, and then we're huddling and talking outside, and around the corner comes a guy in a motorcycle and a sidecar, the Germans, 3 of them, and they had Panzerfaust. They spot us, they jump off and let go of Panzerfaust, and we see it coming. I don't know what to do. It looks like a football coming at us, and the thing hit and knocked out all 4 of us. I was hit in the arm, and the shrapnel and the concussion blew my glasses out of the lenses out of the glasses, and sort of stunned, couldn't see. And also in that town was in that suburb there was either a POW camp or a work camp, and there was when the troops heard us coming, or they heard us coming in there with the fire and all that's going on, all the shooting, they rioted, killed their guards, and were running through the town, tearing the place apart. There were DPs, there were Russians and Poles, a couple of Americans, and some English soldiers that were in that camp or in that compound. And so with the 4 of us hurt, we were herded into there, where the medics were going to try and patch us up. I had a bad wound in the arm, and all sort of scratches all over the face and that type of stuff from this Panzerfaust. And the arm was bleeding pretty badly. I couldn't use it at all. But I had a lot of clothing on. I had an overcoat and a jacket and an OD shirt and long underwear, so it went through all that layers before it penetrated. But anyhow, they decided to pull us out of town and go back to where, up on a knob of a hill that overlooked the town. The captain hauled all the people out of the town back up and said, we're going to see if we can't get some reinforcements here, because we're not going to get out of here. So he got on the radio, and we're so far out in front we couldn't get communications. The radio operator couldn't communicate with anybody, and this is on the CD radio. Couldn't get back to headquarters or anything at that time. So they decided, well, we'll just wait here. And they didn't know what to do with the casualties, so they said, well, we'll have to try and see if they get some medical. We had our own little medics there, but a couple of guys needed surgery. I know I needed surgery to get sewn up. And so did this guy that got a bad wound in the stomach. And then there were some others that were there. I don't know where they were from. There was a couple of Germans that were wounded that were with us. So I'd say along about 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock that night, a tank platoon or tank column, a small short tank column, came into the area, and they had an ambulance behind them. Now, whether they'd gotten radio contact or were sent from somebody or what, I don't know, but the ambulance was there, and they boarded us all into the ambulance. There was about 4 or 5 GIs and this German guy and something else. So the ambulance was loaded, and the driver started back and going up the hill through this big vineyard there. And we run into a German column hiking down, and they're wearing these little blackout lamps around their necks. You could see the whole column going back, God, about a couple hundred yards, about 3 or 4 abreast, just a big, huge column. So the driver panics, throws in reverse, went back all the way down to where we started, and stayed there. Said, I'm not going any farther. I'm not going to get captured by these guys. So we sat there, and then waited till daylight. And then we started out back again in another route to get back. They figured they gave another routing to go. And the next day we got to the 190 back hospital, and that's where I had surgery on my arm. And was patched up there, given the Purple Heart. And stayed there about 2 or 3 days, and then I was evacuated to the 100th General Hospital in Bar-le-Duc, France. And that was, quite a bit, I can't think it was in the east over in northeast, just west of the Alsatian region of France, Bar-le-Duc is. And this is a huge hospital that was there, and just full of American GIs that were all recovering from wounds from the whole 7th and 3rd Army area. So I stayed there about, I'd say, this was on March, I got wounded on March 21st, I think it was, 21st. And so we were there, I didn't get even to the back hospital, I think it was about the 24th. And then back to the hospital in Bar-le-Duc. Stayed there until, the war ended in May. So I stayed there through April. And then at the end of April, I think I was released from the hospital, and I was sent back to the 12th Armored. And by that time, the 7th Army was all the way down into southern Germany. And we started back with this move from the hospital to a replacement depot. And then the replacement depot was I don't know what city they were in now. But we would stay with the replacement depot, and each day they would take off with the group of going to various units to deliver the recovered wounded to these various units in the 7th and 3rd Armies. And we would start out for the 12th, and they were moving so fast and going, so some of them were all the way into Austria, I believe, at that time. But as it turned out, they couldn't find out where the division was, so I spent about 2 weeks dinking around while they were taking us on trucks trying to find where the 12th was with this replacement depot. But eventually they found them, and the 12th headquarters was in Heidenheim, and we put us on for the 12th. My particular unit at that time was way into Austria. So Heidenheim was about, I guess, north and east of Munich, I think. Heidenheim was, but that was where the division headquarters was. And we get back to there, and I arrived at division headquarters on VE Day, May 6th. That's when I arrived at division headquarters. So the war was over, they're all celebrating. And from there we went, I think I stayed around division for about 2 days, 3 days, and they called the 92nd, and they sent a Jeep up from where they were to pick me up and take me back to the 92nd and eventually the D Troop, where I wound up with the D Troop at a place in, where the hell was it? I went through that a little too quick for you. There's 12, 13. I think what town they were in. They were in Hohenstein, Hohenmatt, Hohennatt, Hohenhatheim. It was a big estate. Our troop was built at it, and I remember I have pictures of that building at home, a beautiful place. And it was a great thing getting back and seeing all my old buddies from D Troop again that I hadn't seen for a couple of months. And they did not believe that nobody thought I was coming back. They had already written me off. I was taken off the troop rolls and everything. So like they wrote a history of the 92nd after the war ended over there, and the company clerk had taken me off the roll, so I don't appear in the list of members at the end of the war in D Troop. Not there, but my name is in the back where the guys that got awards and decorations, because I got a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, and I don't.
When did you get the Bronze Star for?
I was leading a patrol. This was earlier on. I forgot to mention, but I was on a patrol that we were in an area. This was probably up around. It was before. I'm trying to think. It had to be before Heidenheim. Maybe before we went to that attack area where they had the disaster. But there was an area, there was two divisions, the 44th, I think, and the 63rd. There was a gap between the two, and they wanted to put D Troop in between them, but they needed to contact both sides, so they sent me on a patrol to coordinate between where we were, and so they would know that we were filling this area in between there. And that's what I was given the Bronze Star for. I went to this one infantry company and pointed on the map to the command post where units of the 12th or the 92nd was, and then sent me over to the other infantry company to tell them, because they weren't joined in the straight force or something like that. That's the way it was explained to me afterwards in the write-up. And I can't remember what I have it. I saw it in a book someplace, and I don't know where it was. But that ends it up. At the end of the war, we. The division stayed in Heidenheim, headquarters did, and then we, as D Troop, we moved back up north of Heidenheim and occupied a little town called Natheim. And in there, we were there for maybe a month and a half or so. And while there, we had to go to all the villages around there and search every home for contraband. The contraband was cameras, weapons, and I can't think what else was, but we searched every home, every house. And then if there was German deserters, we were supposed to see if they were SS. If they weren't SS, we didn't bother them. The SS guys had a tattoo on their arms, so we had to make them show their arms to see if they had the SS tattoo. And then if they were just guys that just deserted and went home, farmers or villagers or what have you. So we didn't bother trying to turn them in. We did that for maybe I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months there, and our CP, our headquarters, was in this little town of Natheim. We had the hotel there as the headquarters, and each platoon was at each end of the town, and it took over 2 or 3 houses to sort of cover things coming into the town. And behind, also across the street from our hotel was a town brewery, where we had a head brewer on the tap all the time. And division headquarters had a real good brewery in Heidenheim that they would ship a couple of barrels a day down to us from Heidenheim, or we'd send a Jeep in to pick up the beer at Heidenheim. And we also drank red vermouth there, vermouth and beer, sweet vermouth and beer. We had a big meadow behind the hotel there where we played baseball, did our close order drill, and then the captain would have a parade once or twice a week and give out the awards. He saved all the awards, the Purple Hearts and the Bronze Stars or whatever, and they'd have a company formation, pin the medal on, and then everybody salute him. That'd be over. So that's where I got the actual Bronze Star pinned on me, was there in Natheim. From Natheim, then we moved over to Schloss, Texas. Headquarters of the 92nd was in Schloss, Texas. But we consolidated the whole 92nd in the Schloss, Texas, which is a huge castle on top of a hill in this region there of Germany. And there were beautiful gardens and everything. And we maybe stayed there a month or so, and then they put us on trains, and they were going to send us to the port of embarkation in Marseille to go to Japan. The war in Japan wasn't over yet, so we were put on these boxcars, and we headed out across Germany, and we were in Worms. and then they stopped the train in Worms, at the railroad yards in Worms, and we learned that the war in Japan had ended, that the Japanese had surrendered, and everybody, they didn't know what to do. We're going to just stay. So we stayed in Worms on the trains. They were eating K rations for about 3 days, and then they sent us back to Schloss, Texas. We went back there and then reorganized there, and then they started maneuvering us out to for our discharge, or when you got the points and that type of stuff. So the various units started breaking up, and what happened? You had points based on months or years of service, years overseas, battle stars, awards, marriage, and children. So you got points for each of those items. So my total points, because I had the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart, I had the equivalent of a guy that was with the outfit all the way and was married and had a kid. So I was transferred out to the 36th Infantry Division in Ulm, Germany, and assigned to the quartermaster company of the 36th Infantry Division. And the quartermaster company, most of these guys had fought in Italy, and came through Italy, southern France, all the way up into Germany, and went to work as a quartermaster. Doesn't get many casualties. The infantry companies, all the line companies, probably had been replaced 3 times over, but the quartermaster was a basic complement, and most of them had already gone home, but there were still some around. So while there, we were processed to ship out, and I remember we had also, this was a tragedy what happened to us there. We had an airplane. We're in this mountainous region around Ulm there, a C-37 into a mountainside just out of the city there, had taken a group of GIs on a pass to Paris or something, relief to Paris, and the total wipeout. Everybody aboard of the plane was dead, and we had to go up there and go through the wreckage and take and bag all the parts of the bodies and put them all together for all these burned guys all over this mountainside. The only 2 intact bodies that were there on the scene, and they were all stripped, were the pilot and co-pilot. There were 2 naked white bodies up in the front of on the side of the hill, and then everybody else was all blackened and all over the side of this mountain, and parts rolled all the way down to the base of the mountain. So we were there about 4 days cleaning up that whole operation. And I don't know what the guy, with the pilot didn't see the mountain or what happened, but we never did find that out. And I'm sure no investigation the way they did things then. But anyhow, that was the worst detail I had while in the quartermaster company. And then we shipped out of there down to the 36th down to Camp Lucky Strike, just north of Marseille, where we were in a tented camp there, and it's staging for shipping over back to the States. And we boarded a vessel there called the Amanda Lykes. The Lykes Shipping Company is a steamship company headquartered in Mobile, Alabama, and they had specialty. There was shipping fruit, a fruit shipping company from banana boats from Central America and other fruits coming into the U.S. So this was a converted banana boat into a troop ship, and it was also ran by the Army. They ran that ship. The Army did, not the civilian crew. They were boss of the crew, but that way the Army did. So we boarded that ship at Marseille, this group from the 36 I was with, and we sailed out of Marseille on, let's see, when the hell was that? Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. We had to declare our money. The Army confiscated all our money. We were in Ulm there with the 36. We had to go before a group of 2 officers and declare how much currency we had in occupation money, or how much French francs. We had German marks that was occupation currency, and we had to declare all money we had over $1,200. We could retain $1,200 of currency, but anything over that they wanted to confiscate. The thought being, people were sending money home through the post office or money orders and that type of stuff. So if you could give a substantial reason why you had more than the 1,200, they figured each guy could have 1,200. what the reason, we were never told the reason, but that anything over state how you got it, because I remember one of the guys in there said he had like $6,000. And he said, I got it cutting hair. I've been cutting hair since incidentally to here, and I saved all the money. I think they let him keep 3,000 of the 6. And they confiscated the balance. So anyhow, that was, I've never talked to anybody who had to go through that experience, that they had to declare their money and the Army confiscated their money.
They worried about looting?
Well, no, see, everybody had money from the black market. You could, like when we went to Brussels, or when you went into Paris, you could take a carton of cigarettes into Paris, and you could sell a carton of cigarettes that was given to you free through the distribution of those things, and you could sell it for $20 American in Paris. $20 equivalent to francs. I can't remember what the exchange rate was, but that's what a carton of cigarette brought you. So when you went to Paris, or the guys went to Paris, different ones, they give them cartons of cigarettes, said, hey, sell the cigarettes for me. So I remember when I went to Brussels that time, we took all kinds of cigarettes. The Brussels people didn't want them. They had all kinds of cigarettes. They didn't have any black market there at all. At the same time, people who went to Paris had a black market. So then also, when we sailed out of, let's see what date we left Marseille. If I can remember the exact date or not. I don't have the exact date, but it was probably around the 20th of December. No, that's when I arrived. So it had been, we were at sea about, so I probably left about the 15th of December out of Marseille. I would say maybe between the 10th and the 15th. We sailed out of Marseille in this troop ship. And I remember no sooner had we left, there was a huge storm. And the ship was rocking from the rear. The ship would go way up like this in the front, then drop down, then go up like this, boom. And I don't think there was a guy on board that wasn't sick. After a couple hours, everybody's over the side. I remember I felt okay. I went into they had a nice mess hall there on the ship where you went in, and they had all these standing where you got your tray of food through the line, and you put it on a table that was chest high, and you ate standing up at the mess hall on the ship. And when I got in there, I was hungry. Got in the door, and I could smell the odor coming out of the mess area, going down in the hold there. Oh wow, that odor! And there was a combination of vomit and everything else. And I get in there, the whole place is loaded with trays of food, nothing touched. So I remember I had some crackers and an apple and something else on the tray, and took it and went up on deck and sat on deck. I didn't get sick, but I ate the crackers and apples. But as I said, everybody was sick. So it was 2 days, and then out of Marseille, we put into Gibraltar. And in Gibraltar, the ship had to be refueled. So while in Gibraltar, we were out in the harbor, and all these guys were rowing out in these little boats, and they were selling stuff over the side to the GIs on deck. And they had baskets. So they were the first guys out there. They had cases of brandy in these little rowboats. And they would put a bottle of brandy and they'd send it up in the basket. Oh no, we'd had to send down. They wanted $2 for a bottle of brandy. $2, Joe. $2, Joe. So they send down the $2 to the boat, and he'd put the bottle of brandy in and go back up. So I think I probably sold 2 or 3 cases of brandy, because within an hour and a half later, a whole bunch of guys were staggering around drunk in the ship with the brandy. Then in addition, they were selling things like huge tapestries. The guy had hold a tapestry up, a homemade tapestry, and was selling it for $10 or something like that. Wristwatches, they were selling Swiss watches, and this went on for, I'd say, about 2 or 3 hours while these guys all did their sales over the side of the ship from these little baskets. So I didn't buy anything. Then they also going on deck on that ship was some of the hugest crap games I've ever seen, run by pros. They had the crap table all set up with blankets and everything, and they controlled the games, whoever were running. Whether the original guys on the ship that were part of the shipboard crew from this MSTS group or what, but there were big games going on board ship, and poker games with it, gambling all the way. So then from there, we arrived at Newport Beach, or Hampton Roads, Virginia, on the 20th of December, 1945, and debarked there with the bands and banners and all that stuff at Newport Beach. And from there, we went over and processed through an area where we had tags to where we were going to be sent out of there to for discharge, to a processing center for discharge. And I was going up to Camp New York, or no, Fort Dix, New Jersey. I was going up there. I wanted to go there to be discharged so I could go into New York and see a friend of mine that I went to college with, who was had been a Navy in the Coast Guard in the Pacific, and was a beach master in the Pacific on 6 of MacArthur's invasions. He was a good classmate of mine in college, and I had corresponded with him all the time during the war. And he was on the war bond. He came back from the Pacific and was on the war bond tour in the U.S. And Matt Catlin, his name was. And he had a heck of a good job at working for Esquire magazine as a writer for Esquire at that time. He was discharged from the Coast Guard and was writing a little advertising copy and that type of stuff. But anyhow, he was an old musician, a good friend of mine, and so I wanted to spend a couple of days with him before going home. But as it turned out, I got into New York on Christmas night, or Christmas morning, Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, I got into New York from Fort Dix. They gave us all 3-day passes. So I signed out for Cleveland and took the train to Cleveland, got home at Christmas night in 1945 at home. And I stayed through New Year's, had a big celebration at home, stayed through New Year's, went back 3 days late from the pass. And they just read my name. I said, what happened? Well, they just read your name off. You weren't there. They figured, well, you don't want to be discharged. So they just went to the name at the bottom of the pile again. So I got discharged on the 7th of January, 1946. So that was the end of my Army career. Came home and re-enrolled in college, and finally got my degree in 47.
And what did you do after that?
I went in the FBI. I was in the FBI for 12 years. We had an agent come to our class, our graduating class, and they were recruiting people then because the head count was way down, and they had offered the jobs if you could get as all you needed was a college degree. You had to pass their background check and the interrogation by the SAC, the special agent in charge of the office. And so the agent said, if you're interested, I'll take your names and then we'll call you down for an appointment. So 3 or 4 of us put our names in it. And I got called down maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later for an interview. And then I filled out they gave me the papers and the test, took all the examination and that stuff at the office, interviewed by the boss. And everything appeared favorable. And I didn't hear nothing. Not a sound. I guess about 7 or 8 months, but my sister worked for the FBI as a stenographer in the Cleveland office, and at that time she was on a special in Washington during the loyalty program, and so she was in Washington, and I talked to her on the phone and told her what the hell happened. But can you find out what's happened to my application down there since you're in Washington? So she had a friend that worked at the personnel section, and they pulled my file, I guess, and said that it was held up because of physicals, because the eyesight and the 20%, I had the war wound, and I was given a 20% disability on the war wound. So they didn't think they could waive both things, but they would take another look at my file again and see what they could do. So that was what they told me. So I got recalled into Cleveland there to a hospital in Cleveland, Marine Hospital, for a complete physical again. And then they gave me a real tough eye exam. And I was able to cheat and pass the exam by memorizing the chart. Because the doctor was a surgeon, he left me alone in the room while he went into surgery and came back, and I knew the chart forwards, backwards, upside down. And I came out with 20/40 in one eye and 20/60 in the other, corrected to 20/20. So they waived that. They said, you're okay, you're in. I never had another eye exam after that. So that was my...
All right. Anything else you want to... Oh, can you just tell us some of your buddies
That I was my buddies then?
Mm-hmm.
My closest buddy at that time was a guy named Ray Butcher. He's never come to these reunions. He's been to 1 or 2 in Louisville because that's where he lives. He was in our platoon then. Another one that comes to all of them is Joe Barnack. Another one I think you guys talked to quite a number of years ago in, I'll say St. Louis, I think it was, or maybe Schaumburg, Joe McCluggage, who was in the D Troop. I say there, who else? Well, I take other D Troopers as well. Our CO just died here 2 weeks ago. 2 months ago. Bill Bartholomew. I think who else? I see. I think that'd be about my closest. Those are the closest I had. Other than those are probably exchange Christmas cards with them all the time, or talk to them, and they come. These guys come to the reunions. I went to the first reunion in 1947 in New York, and the second one in Chicago in '48. I was in the bureau when I went to the second one. I was in training school, and I went, took a weekend off and went up to Chicago, to the reunion in Chicago. Oh, incidentally, I got the appointment. I got the appointment in July of '48. So, if you want to know anything about Current, married, 5 children. I worked at Lockheed. I worked in the FBI for 12 years. Resigned in Chicago and went to California, and went to work at Lockheed in Sunnyvale.
When did you get married?
Got married in September 9th, 1950, in Chicago. I was in San Francisco then in the bureau, and my wife came out. She came out. She was a nurse and trained at Rochester, Minnesota, at the clinic in Rochester. So she was an RN, and I met her. She was a girlfriend of a cousin of mine in Chicago, who fixed us up on a blind date in 1950. So then she came out for vacation and was presumably to visit a couple of friends in San Francisco that worked for Stanford Hospital, and saw me during that time frame. Then went back, and I sent her an engagement ring for her birthday in July, and then we were married in September in Chicago. She came back. We had a little apartment in San Francisco, and so our oldest 3 children were born in San Francisco, and then I got transferred to Chicago in 1955. It was like going to hell after the wonders of San Francisco. They thought we were doing me a favor, sent me back there, but Chicago was, I think, she was pregnant with our 4th child when we got there, and at first it was in July in Chicago, and we think out of that July we were living in a little small flat over at a paint store on the northwest side of Chicago, and every day was over 90, about 90% humidity for the whole month. And I said, geez, who needs this? But we stuck it out for 5 years, and then when this opportunity came up at Lockheed in Sunnyvale, I was able to take care of it, and moved back out to the West Coast. I've been there ever since. So our youngest 2 were born in Chicago. That's the extent of that. They all are married and had their careers and doing their own thing now. 2 sons are firemen out in California, one in San Jose, one in Chico, and then the daughter, a doctor at Kaiser Hospital in Sacramento, OBGYN, and then another daughter is a Air Force Reserve Lieutenant Colonel nurse in New York. She's married, has 2 children, lives in New York, and another daughter in Livermore, California, that sells the components for the computer industry, making all kinds of big bucks.
Super. What